lot of people have asked about Crimstang and what that car means to me. What Crimstang meant to me really isn't that important. What's more important is what it meant to him and all the people who knew him. Crimpet was my best friend Andrew Bauer, and his 96 Cobra was the Crimstang. They say every car has a story, and whether you bought that car brand new and modified it, or you restored it from the ground up, the car tells a story about the car itself and also the owner. Today we're going to tell you the story of Crimstang. People have asked me since I owned it, why is the car called Crimstang? Well, Andrew Bauer was my best friend's name, and his father at the time worked for Tastykake. And one of Tastykake's most popular products was the Crimpet, which is a butterscotch little cake. Never had one, I suggest trying it. But we started calling him Crimpet, and then as his car got more known and started going faster and faster, the car just took the name Crimstang. I mean, definitely a lot of the story of Crimstang and that 96 Cobra happened here at Cecil County Dragway. I've spent a lot of time at this racetrack. I mean, it's absolutely crazy being back here after all these years. I mean, I'm used to coming here with tons of loud cars and lots of people, and being here today with nobody else around, it's definitely a little bit different. And the thing with going to Cecil, whether it was a Wednesday night, Friday night, Saturday, whatever, it was always a group of us. It was a social thing. We'd all meet up at my shop, cruise down together. We'd all hang out at the track all night. And the one thing about drag racing, if you haven't done it or you haven't ever been into active racing, drag races are family. I mean, if you're at home, if you're in the pits or whatever, you'll lend somebody tools, parts, whatever it takes to keep that car on the track. Now, of course, once you hit the track and you pull up to the tree, well, then all bets are off, and then it becomes competitive. But again, once that quarter mile's done and you're back in the pits, everybody's family again, and anybody who needs anything, they'll lend a hand. Like I said, hand, tools, whatever. That's just what racers do for each other. So I first met Crimpet years ago, and at the time I was racing a 91 Mustang GT, and I was working for a stereo shop, and he came in looking for equipment for his new Mustang. He just picked up a 98 Mustang GT, and at the time, honestly, I did not like the guy at all. He was arrogant. I really did not even like helping him in the store. But we started talking about cars one day. He ended up following us to the track a couple times, and he was hooked. The 98 GT brought down to the shop. We put gears, exhaust, all the normal bolt-on stuff, but it really wasn't fast enough for him. And eventually, he traded the car in for the 96 Cobra that we now know as Crimstang. So I was really into racing when Crimpet came along. I mean, I still had that 91 GT at the time, and it was a bottom 11 car, which anything in the low 11s was fast. Again, this was a lot of years ago now. And like I said, he was impressed with how fast that car was. I ended up getting rid of that to get my own 96 Cobra, and at that point we had a couple other friends with him, and we all just got extremely competitive. And Crimpet was one of those guys that you could tell, I mean, he was hooked from day one. After his first trip down the track, he came back, he had that shake you get from adrenaline, and again, he was hooked. I mean, he got home, all the stereo equipment went out, the subwoofers came out, the back seat came out, made the car as light as possible, and then the modifications started, and all the stereo equipment got replaced by performance parts, and for the rest of his life, I mean, he was hooked on drag racing. He was all about it. He was the life of the party. I mean, he was the guy that literally, if you were having a party or anything you were doing, whether it's the drag strip, dinner, whatever, until he showed up, it just wasn't there. And then he showed up and everything was elevated, and he was just one of those people you wanted to be around. I mean, he was always joking, always in a good mood, always fun. I mean, literally, like I said, the center of attention and the life of the party. Yeah, there's so many stories about Crimpet, and a lot of them, unfortunately, I can't share with a public audience. But one of my favorites was when he had Crimstang, his tires were shot. And he had just got a new camcorder. He was actually working at a stereo store at a local mall. And he decided he wanted to go outside. He set up the camcorder, and he was going to get rid of those tires, the proper way by burning them to the ground. He's doing this burnout. The one thing he wasn't aware of is he was actually parked next to the fresh air intake for the entire mall. So as the smoke's coming off his tires, it's going right inside this vent system and into the mall itself. So much so they actually called the fire department thinking that the mall was on fire, and it turned out it was just him getting rid of his tires. On the night of August 31st, he was out with some friends. He was on his way home. It was a road that he knew really, really well. Nobody really knows to this day what exactly happened, but he ended up going off that road, crashed the car, and was killed instantly. So when Crimpet died, I mean, it was obviously a huge shock to me. I mean, it was 2 weeks before his 22nd birthday, and the whole car community, the whole Mustang community was just shocked. I mean, anybody who knew him just couldn't believe it. I mean, for someone that full of life to be gone that early, it was rough. It was rough to go through it. So when Crimpet passed away, like I said, his father had owned a Laser Red 96, and his father actually retired soon after And the whole family moved down to their farmland they had down in Maryland. And they took Crimpstang with them. And he kept it for a couple years. You know, he drove it around, would do the basics to it. You know, he had planned on racing it with us, but he just never could get into it. You know, it just wasn't something he wanted to do. And a few years later, you know, they contacted me one day and said, hey, you know what, we can't think of anybody else who knew him like you did, who we want to see have this car. And, you know, they basically said, if you want it, it's yours, come down and get it. So we did. I went with a couple friends down there. We went to pick up the car, and you could tell it'd been sitting for a while. And you know, we brought it home, and you know, I kind of cleaned it up, went through the fluids, did all the basic stuff you do to a car that was sitting for a while. And for a while, I just drove it. You know, I still viewed it it wasn't my car, it was his, and I still do to this day. I left it exactly how it was when he had it. So it kind of ran the same number every year, and you know, while that was fun, you know, eventually we decided it was time for a change. Back in 2016, I started talking to my wife and family and friends, and I said, you know what, it's time. Like, you know, I always talked about doing it. Let's take his car. You know, I hadn't modified it since he passed away, but I decided to turn it into what he always wanted it to be, which was a factory stock race car. Now, at the time, factory stock was now a 10-second class and not an 11-second class. You know, the stock engine wouldn't cut it. So, you know, if you've seen on our channel, we did a whole series on it, but we converted Crimpstang from a street car into a full-blown factory stock race car. You know, the factory stock build we felt was exactly what Crimp would want. I mean, he was always an all-motor guy. He loved naturally aspirated cars. He loved the high RPM launches, the wheels-up launches, the, you know, full power shifts. Like, he was all about that. And, you know, building the car from factory stock, I mean, I'd love to see the look on his face when that car almost stands on the bumper and how fast it's gotten. I mean, the fastest he ever went in it was 1220s, and you know, now it's a mid 10-second car. Like, it's a completely different world, and yeah, I'm certain he'd love it. You know, over time, your priorities change, your life changes, and you know, honestly, as much as I love drag racing, once he died, you know, part of me died with him, and a lot of my desire to race died with him. I did run factory stock with it. We ran that series, and the car's been to the track a lot, but I just never had the fire I used to have. I mean, it was fun to compete, and you know, NMRA drivers are the best around. I mean, competing at that level I was proud of what we did, and especially that his car was involved in it. But again, as time goes on, I find that, you know, the drag racing is just not there for me anymore. And it's a spark I've tried to get back. I want to get back. I really wish there was a way, but as I've gotten older, you know, my life has changed, my priorities have changed, and drag racing just isn't what it used to be to me.